I'm Pat Doris. Welcome to The Story. We're going to take a deep dive tonight on a crime out of Southern Oregon that's making headlines across the country. We're covering this story in such an in-depth way because the FBI thinks there could be more victims out there, and the suspect lived in both Portland and Vancouver in the past year. It's definitely our big story tonight. Before we get too far into this, a warning that many of the details are violent and graphic. We're talking about a kidnapping case that sounds like it's straight out of a TV drama, but the feds say it's all real. We have new details from court documents and an NBC exclusive interview with the FBI agent in charge of the case. First, let's make sure that we're all caught up. Here's a little bit of background. We're talking about the arrest of a man named Negasi Zuberi. He had been living in Klamath Falls until he was arrested just about a week ago. And when the FBI started looking into him, they found some disturbing information. Law enforcement first got involved in the case back on July 15th when a woman in Klamath Falls flagged down a driver and called 911. She told police that she had just escaped from a makeshift prison cell after a man kidnapped her from Seattle. She was a sex worker when a man solicited her for sex. He told her he was a police officer, put her in handcuffs and leg shackles, threatened her with a taser, and put her into the back of his car. The woman told police that he started driving for hours. She noticed a map app in his car showing that he still had more than 2 hours to drive until his destination. That's when she assumed that she'd been kidnapped. She also says he stopped and sexually assaulted her several times during the drive. After more than 400 miles of driving, the woman told police they got to a house in Klamath Falls. And she says the man locked her in this cinderblock cell in the garage. The man left, and the woman says she realized she might die if she didn't try to escape. So she started beating on the metal door to try and open it. Here's Special Agent Stephanie Shark of the FBI. She's the agent in charge of the case.
She'd been beating that cell for hours, and her hands were very bruised and bloodied, and there was skin broken on them.
After getting out of the cell and climbing a fence, the woman ran for help. Police used cell phone data to track down that man living in the house, Negasi Zuberi. They ended up cornering him in a Walmart parking lot in Reno, Nevada. Police say his wife and one of his kids was with him. They say he refused to come out of the car, tried to destroy his phone, and he even cut himself and started bleeding heavily before eventually being arrested. But when investigators started investigating, they quickly realized that the case goes much deeper than one kidnapped woman. They searched the Klamath Falls home, which, by the way, is owned by the mayor of Klamath Falls. Not involved in the case, though. The mayor had been renting out the home and quickly evicted Zuberi after his arrest. Inside that home, though, they found notes detailing a plot labeled Operation Takeover. It included instructions to leave his phone at home and to target people who had, quote, didn't have a bunch of people in their life because, quote, you don't want any type of investigation. The notes also contained drawings of plans for a concrete cell 100 feet underground. Zuberi's wife and children had been living with him in the home, and investigators found out he'd been living all over the country. Here's Agent Shark again.
Through our investigation, have identified he's been in at least 10 states, if not more, over the past several years. And we have information to believe that he has been connected to at least several assaults in those various states. And now we know that he was in Denver, Colorado, Portland, Oregon, Vancouver, Washington, Las Vegas, Nevada, Chicago, Illinois, Bronx, New York.
The feds say he lived in Vancouver around this time last year and in Portland in September after that. Investigators also have him connected to cities in Michigan, Alabama, and California since 2014. They say they've tied Zuberi to 3 more sexual assaults in 3 of those states, and they think it's highly likely there are more victims out there. As you saw in the notes they found in the home, investigators say he targeted people who may not have loved ones checking on them.
Sex workers were part of the population that he targeted, but also other roommates or other people he felt that didn't have connection to anybody else based off the information that we have at this time. And so it would be people who wouldn't necessarily come forward.
We went to check out Zuberi's former neighborhood in Vancouver. Neighbors say they did not get a good feeling from him. Here's what they told us.
He did make some threats towards me that he was going to stab me or kill me if he catches me outside somewhere.
Get off my property. Get off my property. Like, he was subleasing every single space that you could possibly, like literally the living room, I think they had like a little open area when you come up the stairs, kind of like a loft area. He was subleasing that. There were beds there. Like, it was weird. There was a lot of different people.
They say they once saw a young woman crying outside of Zuberi's Vancouver home while he lived there.
My husband's like, do you want us to call the cops? Like, do you need help? Do you want some tea? Like, it's freezing out here. And she's like, no, I'm not going to tell you what he did to me. She said those exact words.
In another bizarre twist to this case, the suspect appeared on the show Judge Judy back in 2019. He was using the alias Justin Heish, and he was in court with the mother of his two kids. He accused her of assaulting him.
24-year-old Justin Heish is suing the mother of his child.
So I would have awarded you money for false arrest because I don't think there was any basis for you to be arrested other than the police in New York sometimes are scared not to make an arrest if there's a call for domestic violence.
In that case, Judge Judy ruled in his favor, ordering his former partner to pay him $2,500 in damages, but she was later granted a restraining order against him, saying that he was abusive to her and their children. The FBI says Zuberi used many aliases. He also went by Sakim Zuberi and Justin Kulasi. The FBI is hoping people who encountered him will now come forward.
The most chilling part of the note is make sure that they don't have a bunch of people in their life. And so we are targeting people. That was who he targeted. And so therefore, we're looking for people who may not have come forward because they did not feel that they had the support or would be believed or that anybody would care. But it's really important for us to make sure that these victims know that we do care and we will help protect them. And he is in custody, so they no longer need to be afraid.
If you know anything about Zuberi, you can contact the FBI at fbi.gov or call 1-800-CALL-FBI. He was charged with interstate kidnapping. It carries a maximum sentence of life in prison. Now let's turn your attention to Southwest Washington, where a county sheriff has severed ties with the local newspaper. What exactly does that mean? Well, the Pacific County Sheriff says his office will no longer respond to questions from reporters with the Chinook Observer. The sheriff's office says it's because the paper has not been printing the truth. The paper's editor says that's ridiculous. Drew Mickelson with our sister station in Seattle went to the coast this week to hear from both sides.
The ongoings of Pacific County, from the shellfish in South Bend to the tourists in Long Beach, have been documented by the Chinook Observer for more than 100 years. But the paper's coverage capabilities took a hit last week after the sheriff's office announced it would no longer respond to calls or interview requests from the newspaper. In a Facebook post, the agency said it was deeply troubled with the decision, but noted, quote, "The faulty reporting is doing more to harm public service than it is serving it."
I no longer want to give them little snippets of something I've said and then try and convince the people that I meant something else.
Daniel Garcia became sheriff in January. He says staff will still send press releases to the paper and fulfill public records requests, but he decided to stop speaking to the paper after stories made him out to appear as a constitutional sheriff, a label he rejects, and one he says is divisive. He also noted what he says is a long history of the paper publishing inaccurate stories.
We have told him in the past, and the undersheriff in particular has said, I think you might want to check your sources because they're lying to you. And then the article runs anyway. So it's, again, has to do with accuracy.
He's always free to call me up and tell me so, and we have the records to prove everything that we've ever reported.
Matt Winters has been editor at the Chinook Observer since 1991. He says the award-winning paper has a good relationship with other public agencies and attributes the sheriff's decision to a lack of experience.
Well, I like to get along with everybody, but, damned if I'm going to let a sheriff dictate to me what the news is. It's a dereliction of duty on their part. They have a responsibility as an elected official and as his staff to communicate to the public via the best mechanisms at hand.
Here's something both the editor and the sheriff agree on. They want this current situation to be a temporary one. They both say they would like to work together to find a way to serve the people of Pacific County. In Long Beach, Drew Mickelson, King 5 News.
Thanks, Drew. Here's my opinion on this now. First off, I don't know any more about what's really going on there than what you and I just watched together. Having said that, The sheriff is not the first politician to get mad at a newspaper for reporting things he does not like. It probably happens all the time and we just don't hear about it. Although with the demise of so many local papers, maybe there's less access to politicians in small communities, maybe even yours. And just like any citizen who sees an inaccurate story in the paper or on TV or online, the sheriff certainly has the right to point out the error and get it corrected, and he should do that. And it would not surprise me if more than one local politician doesn't feel comfortable being quoted by reporters, so instead they push the duty off to designated media spokespersons. That's okay too. But you have to communicate. Cutting off the paper completely from any comments from anyone in the department helps exactly no one. It leaves the public in the dark, and it also allows others to shape the discussion about the sheriff's office and what it's doing or not doing and why. The sheriff should not leave that to others outside his department. In fact, maybe he needs to be more verbal about what's happening or not. We saw he's using Facebook. There are so many channels for communications these days. If you don't like what the paper's printing, start putting out your own statements on video or social media. That way you control the narrative and you talk directly to the public. But the best solution might just be for the sheriff and the paper's leader to have a quiet cup of coffee and talk about how they can both serve the public better, since that's why they are both there. And they can do that even if it means sometimes agreeing to disagree. That's my opinion anyway, and you don't have to agree. But what do you think about this? Do you side with the sheriff, the editor, maybe a little bit of both? Let us know, will you? The email is thestory@kgw.com or call and leave a voicemail, 503-226-5090. Still to come on The Story, we'll share some of your thoughts on the Oregon Secretary of State's ruling on Measure 113. Republicans with 10 or more unexcused absences cannot run for re-election next year. But which senators does that apply to for the next election? We'll explain when The Story returns. Let's take a look at some of your thoughts after our big story yesterday about Measure 113. Oregon's new Secretary of State, Lavon Griffin-Valade, ruled that lawmakers with 10 or more unexcused absences cannot run in 2024. Republicans have vowed to challenge that decision in court. But before we get too far in this, a viewer named Eileen asked us which senators will be barred from running next year, at least for now. Well, great question. 10 senators defied Measure 113 and 6 are up for re-election next year. According to a report from OPB last month, 4 of the 6 do plan to run. They are Senate Minority Leader Tim Knopp, Senators Brian Boquist, Dennis Linthicum, and Art Robinson. Senator Lynn Findley has not made up his mind, and Senator Bill Hansel says he's going to retire after his current term ends. So we'll have to wait and see how this plays out in state court. By the way, Willamette Week reports that if the challenge to the Secretary of State's ruling fails in state court, this thing might just go to federal court for a constitutional challenge. Won't that be fun? Prepare for that. Anyway, let's get to your thoughts. Just about everyone who wrote to us or called in agreed with my opinion. Thank you very much. The Republicans need to deal with the consequences of their actions. Vanessa wrote to us, I'm a Democrat and my man is a Republican. We knew exactly what we were voting for when we checked that box. We are tired of games on both sides.
I totally agree with your comments on the conservatives whining and crying that, oh, well, they didn't understand it. They didn't know. It was quite obvious, like it was explained. If you read it, everybody was more than happy to do it. It's just that the GOP is a party of whiners anymore. They seem to think they can bully their way through everything, and I'm tired of it. I used to be a Republican, but the last few years of, well, actually, since Trump got elected, made me a independent and very anti-Republican because they're anti-American. They don't care about the country. All they care about is getting elected and pushing their beliefs onto the majority of the country, even though they are a minority.
Gail agrees with the Secretary of State, writing, you know, in the real world, if you went AWOL for any period of time from your place of employment, there would be no job available to you when you got your head out of your, well, you can read it there. By the way, those are her creative characters at the end of the comment, not ours. And how about this from Colette?
I just wanted to weigh in on the walkout from the Senate. You know, we did vote for that, and we expect our vote to count. So, yes, they should not be allowed to run again.
And Jean told us, unfortunate for us Oregonians who continue to respect and live by what GOPers used to live and breathe, that is law and order, these wayward politicians will now, like the pre-adolescent immatures they are, take their broken translation of Measure 113 into the courts for more and more and more waste of time of taxpayer dollars and nothing whatsoever to show for the money we send to Salem.
I spent 20 years in management consulting jobs with the state of Oregon, from Governor Tom McCall through Bob Straub and Vic Attia. And I agree with what you're talking about, with the legislators should follow, if they're not going to attend the sessions, and get rid of them.
Thanks to everyone who shared your thoughts with us. We do read those emails and listen to the voicemails. And as this drama plays out in court, you can bet we'll keep you updated every step of the way. Coming up next on The Story, my ad-libbed rant last night about whether or not to turn the lights off if you're going to be back in the room soon really hit a nerve for some of you. So much so that we're going to give you the facts behind each type of light bulb and the best practices for saving energy and your money when The Story returns. The KGW School Supply Drive is going on right now. It's easy to give. Point your phone at the QR code to make a donation today. Just $25 helps students start the year with the supplies they need, but anything you're able to give will help out. We want to thank On Point Community Credit Union, Safeway, Pacific Power, and Dick's Auto Group for everything that they're doing to make this year's supply drive a great success. Now let's get into that thorny question that I raised last night about when to turn the lights on or off in your home. For those of you who missed it, I shared that my wife Jackie thinks that it's more energy efficient to just leave the light on in any room if there's any chance that you're going to be back in the next 30 minutes or less. I, on the other hand, correctly I think, believe that you should always turn the light off when you leave a room. So she goes around the house turning the lights on, and then I go behind her turning the lights off. Who's right? You, as always, had lots of input on that question. First off, some of you were nice enough to share that, yeah, this is playing out in your home as well. Terry wrote, "Hey Pat, I'm in your camp. My wife leaves the lights on. I've been turning them off for the entire 56 years of wedded bliss. Viva LED." And Tom added, "Pat, I was laughing at your family where your wife leaves the lights on and you turn them off. That's exactly like me and my wife as well." And over on our YouTube page, yes, we do read your comments over there as well. A viewer wrote, "I'm pretty sure that it's better to leave a light on, if only for a short stint, but I literally cannot help myself and I shut them off anyway, like a Pavlov dog." Yep, I can relate to that. It's a reflex for me to turn off the light when I leave the room, probably my parents telling me that a million times. Fortunately, some of you think that I'm right in this debate with my wife. Thank you very much. Liz wrote, "You are right. Turn off lights when you leave a room always." Score 1 for Pat. But Rick warned, "The karma you lose by declaring your wife wrong may be larger than the money you save." Yes, thank you, Rick. I do understand that. I've been married nearly 29 years and I've learned, you know what, there's some battles that are just not going to be worth it. But I also know this light on or off thing is something that a lot of us do struggle with.
Regarding the matter of whether to turn the lights off or just leave them on, especially for short stints, and I swear there's not a single day go by that I do not wrestle with that very question at least once. Regardless, I will usually do exactly what in my heart of hearts is the opposite of what I believe to be the correct answer after all factors are considered. And I'm pretty sure it's to leave them on. So naturally, I revert to my training and shut them off anyways. Thus, this is one definitive answer that I have had a burning desire to have more light shed upon.
I love it. Thanks, Margie. And I see what you did there at the end. Shed more light upon? That was very nice. All right, the big question is, are you wasting money by turning the light on and off, which apparently wears out some lights faster? And are you saving enough money by turning the light off that it makes a difference in the long run? Well, there are some definitive answers. And some of you were nice enough to send me a link to the government's Energy Saver website, which does spell it all out. This is the main website. It's from the federal government. You can get there by simply searching for when to turn off the lights. Let's start with incandescent lights, which many of us still have. You should turn those off anytime you leave the room. It's the least efficient type. 90% of the energy is given off in heat. So yeah, do yourself and the environment a favor, turn those off. Halogen lights are better than incandescent, but not by much. Turn them off whenever you leave the room as well. Which brings us to CFLs, or compact fluorescent lights. The government says they are more efficient, and if you will be out of the room for 15 minutes or less, yeah, it's fine, just leave them on. If you're going to be gone longer, well, then you should turn them off. These are the bulbs that get a shorter life if you turn them on and off a lot, so keep that in mind. Finally, LED lighting. They are not affected by turning them on and off, and they come on at full brightness when they're turned on. The government does not have a clear bit of advice on whether to turn these off when you leave the room. And while you will be using less energy than an incandescent bulb, it's not zero. So if you're going to be out of the room for a long time, take my advice. Turn them off. So I hope that helps. I don't think it's going to help in my house. When my wife saw last night's show, she turned to me and said, "Hey, I don't get why you think this is such a big deal. Just get over it." Okay, I'll try. That's the end of our show. Thanks so much for watching. And remember the story, our collective story? Well, that never ends. Stick around now for the good stuff coming your way. I'm off, by the way, for the next couple of days, but you'll be in great hands with none other than Blair Best taking the reins here on the show. I hope that you'll join her tomorrow and Friday at 6:30.